Welcome. It is my pleasure today to continue our series on demystifying mental health with our wonderful psychiatrist, Dr. Rohit Chandra, who is a child and adolescent psychiatrist at MGA Chelsea. Welcome again, Rohit, as we today talk about a very important topic, which is academic pressure. So a lot of focus today on children. So actually, for our audience, I'd like to let you know that Dr. Chandra and I are often, approached by parents who say that they are concerned about their children's future. Many of the Indian Americans don't understand the college system well enough, and often they are pushing their kids without really understanding what that system is. And the kids also get very confused with the pressure that is put on them. One of the things that Indians perhaps are not aware is that unlike India, in the US, there are plenty of great colleges with fantastic faculty and facilities. And doesn't matter which college your child goes to, they will end up with great financial success. This is very unlike India, where there are only these few stellar institutions like IITs or AIM, and everybody else, they think they struggle a little bit. So today we are really going to talk a little bit about academic pressure and how this can really, influence your child, and how do you deal with children in middle and high school while pushing them right, but at the same time, not breaking them. So first of all, Rohit, is it correct that the Indian American children face academic pressure, or is just in my imagination?
No, I think you're quite right, Ranjani. I think what you've said is really brilliant. That Indian parents, a lot of the parents here in the U.S. are Indian immigrants, and they, in high school had to determine which career they would go into by maybe 10th standard, and then in 12th standard they had to take some sort of entrance exam for some competitive field, medicine, engineering, and they had to clear that in order to get into one of these top fields. There are a lot of software engineers here as well. So that was the expectation. There was really a true bar. And if you did not make it into one of these prestigious fields, then your future was not so assured. Then it was really a bit of a, the Wild West, to use an American metaphor. Yeah. And so I think, that's the mindset that Indian parents, when they come to the US, have for their kids as well. And, obviously you want your kids to do well in high school, and, you ideally want them to get into a good college. But, there are, you want your kids to also stay balanced. And so that's fairly complicated. What we see here is certainly that Asian parents in general, whether of Indian descent, Korean descent, Chinese descent, are really pushing their kids fairly intensely. And sometimes the kids are internalizing that and pushing themselves fairly hard in high school in order to make it to a top college. Yeah. And while there is benefit to that, there can be some risk as well. And that's what we'll talk about today, that there are risks and benefits to intense academic pressure at the high school level.
Right. And I read one of your papers where you actually studied this a little bit, and there is evidence that indeed Asian and South Asian parents and their children, there is some extra pressure that comes on the thing. And again, this is a very great balancing act for a parent, right? I mean, you want to push your child, the child cannot not do its homework, or, you want to push the child to do its best in academics. And that's how we are trained. Indian Americans value education the most, because that's all we came, that's the token of our success. So, is there a positive way to put pressure, and how do you know when it's a problem?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm actually answering your earlier question now, okay, and I'm going to do that, and then I'll answer your question about positive pressure. So the evidence that we have that pressure is a problem in the U.S. are, and these are rare occurrences, but there are suicides at colleges, and a disproportionate amount of them are Asian. So in the paper, I think that you may have read, which I had written, or one of them anyway, 4 out of 10 suicides at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, between, I think in a 5-year span, were Asian. 6 out of 10 at Cornell in a certain span were Asian. So there are a lot of students who do very well, get into top schools, but then have, struggled to perhaps maintain their grades and feel like failures, or, have very unreasonable expectations, either internalized expectations or parental expectations, and feel like they're not doing well enough. And, these are kids who are obviously very successful. They got into these schools,
Yeah.
but they themselves do not feel good enough. And that's a problem. And then separately, I think the other sort of meta evidence that this is a problem is that in the very competitive high schools in Massachusetts, Lexington High School, Acton Boxborough High School, these kinds of top schools, school districts where parents move to in order for their kids to go to these schools, the administrators have reached out to, psychiatrists, have reached out to Saheli, have reached out perhaps to you saying, can you help? There are a lot of students we have who are really stressed out, may not have many friends, are really under a lot of pressure to do well. And we're concerned about their well-being. We're concerned about their emotional well-being. We're concerned about them socially. We feel like they're not happy. So this is the kind of other evidence.
Yeah.
And lastly, I'm involved with an Asian Student Mental Health Center at Mass General Hospital. It's called the Center for Cross-Cultural Student Emotional Wellness.
Yeah.
And this was created because Chinese international students were having real trouble adapting to the US, but also because there had been a pattern of Asian American students overall, high school and college, having a tough time dealing with this degree of academic pressure and often getting burnt out or depressed or anxious. So, this has been described in newspaper articles as well.
Yeah,
this
that's
is a problem in our community.
Right. And how do you, I mean, like I said, I have parented two children, and often it's a tough thing, right? Like you want to tell your child, work hard, do your homework, excel, you should, I have often told my kids, you need to be the best, and I've done that. And somehow they seem to be okay with it. So the question is, how much can you push? And when do you know, hey, stop now,
It's a great question. So you asked about positive pressure and then how much to push. I mean, I think you have to know your kid to a degree. I mean, if you're pushing a fairly compliant kid who says, yeah, no problem, I can do that, and you're not really getting much pushback, and you have a flexible kid that says, sure, I'll do those things, that's fine, seems good to me, and you're not getting you don't have a very stressed child, fine. But if you have a child that says, I don't want to go to Russian School of Math, and is like 9 years old, and he's like, I wanted to this, why don't you understand? You are hearing from that child, and maybe this is not enjoyable at all. Or maybe this 15-year-old taking 5 AP classes is up till midnight and is constantly having headaches or stomach aches, and just is showing signs of stress, and then that may be a sign to kind of pull back. Or if it's the child putting pressure on him or herself, asking him to sort of cool it in a sense and decompress. But just like with test taking, you want an optimal amount of anxiety. You don't want so little anxiety the person says, I have a test on Monday, I haven't studied, it's Sunday, I'll study tonight. That's not good. What's also not good is someone just being like, oh my God, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. No, I need to study, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. That's not helpful either. So there's there's a bell curve in a sense, I mean, this bell-shaped curve. There's some optimal amount where you are like appropriately concerned about the results that you are studying, but not so much that it impedes your function, not so little that it compromises your caring. And the same thing, I think one has to know what the sweet spot is for one's kid and, push the kid to his or her capabilities without going over. And, sometimes parents don't know where that line is. So they err on the side of pushing harder. And sometimes kids are have very high standards, and they themselves may push themselves a little too hard, and parents have to help them kind of pull back. It's not easy.
Actually, that's one thing that I think I always see with young children's parents, right? Like that, the parent is constantly talking about doing well. And this obviously that child internalizes and feels they're not doing well. So the pressure often comes from them itself. And I think, so one of the things actually I feel, that people, Indian Americans suffer from is they don't know the system. And that's a big issue. And they just say, kid, you need to do stuff, which I don't know what that stuff is, but you got to do more of it. So to get ahead in life, so I really recommend, I think anybody watching this, find, a college counselor, a professor. I know my husband does a lot of free college workshop for this exact thing, demystify that process. It doesn't need, the only number one will not succeed in life. Everybody pretty much will succeed in life in different ways. And, that's not everybody needs to go to Harvard. And one thing I will say is that, many of the parents here didn't go to Harvard and they're very successful.
Right.
So I think it's a good thing to see. And one question I had is, when I have seen successful children, what I see, quote unquote successful, again, I should put that in very much in quote, hardworking children, let me put it that way. I see that it's their parents are also very hardworking. So
Right.
I wanted to ask you, how much of it comes from watching rather than from listening? And is that a better approach, to, learn by showing or teach by showing rather than teach by yelling?
Yes, exactly. Kids do absolutely follow and sort of model themselves after what you do and your behavior. So, I will say my mother has told me, oh, don't do things this way. It didn't work for me. Do things this way. So she may tell me, I say, sorry, Mom, you've shown me how to do it. I'm doing things that way. No, no, don't do this. But it's difficult, do as I say, not as I do. But parents may wish that, but you do what they do. So I agree. I think kids see how parents work. They see their work ethic. And if you have a good work ethic, you are demonstrating how to live in this world. Another point is what parents miss is that kids have their own intrinsic motivation. You don't have to force them to do things. They have their own wishes to succeed. They want to impress their peers. They want to impress their parents. They want to actualize their own potential. They are genuinely interested in certain areas. They want to go towards those. You don't have to take over their will and say, you're 13, you don't know what you're doing. Let me tell you what to do. If you do that, if you say my child doesn't know what to do, oh my God, my child is going to fail, let me start directing them, then it's not a great thing, because then you have to keep on pushing. And at some point, the child will have to rely on his or her own instinct, and they won't know how to. So early on, if you can harness that intrinsic motivation, figure out what the child is interested in, and let them go towards that, trusting that they want to do well in life. They don't want to drop a social class, just like, you don't want them to drop a social class. If you're upper middle class in America, you want your kids to stay there or be upper class. They don't want to drop the lower classes either. That's not in their interest. So I think, you have to trust that they wish for the same success that you wish for them. And there may be different ways of reaching it. But they want what you want. They want to do well in life. So pushing too hard sometimes, counteracts their natural tendency to want to do well, and it's counterproductive.
No, I love what you said, that they really want to do well. I mean, it's natural for them, every child, to want to succeed to the best of their ability. And and of course, I think the important thing to note is the definition of success, right? It's not just getting into an Ivy League school, because often people think it's that, or getting into a medical college and that's it, right? And we know that when Harvard, for example, Business School has its reunions, there's a lot of evidence that people are not necessarily happy. So I think at the end of the day, success is really building a happy child. And I think, is it right to know that what you do, between 4 and 12 is a very important time, and to build life skills is a good thing, or am I wrong about that? That's what I've heard.
It is difficult to disagree with that. I think it's, I think what you've said about work ethic is very important. It's important to get kids to be disciplined, but also to enjoy learning, so it's a tough balance. And you want to make sure that they're doing their homework early, setting good habits, but also that they are balanced, that they are seeing their friends, that they do find the natural world interesting. You want these things. You don't want your kids to go out of balance, just like you don't want yourself to go out of balance. If you're working 40 hours a week and your boss says, hey, put in an extra 30 next week, and the same the next week, and the same the next week, you will go out of balance. And then your boss might say, hey, you need to get some sleep. It's like, well, I would be sleeping better if you were working me 70 hours a week. I would be eating better if you were working me 70 hours a week. I might be seeing my friends and having a more balanced life and not looking like I'm, death warmed over. So when we do the same with our kids, and we say, take 6 APs this year, and the kid says, okay, all right, I'll do it. I mean, sometimes we're making our kids quite stressed, and sometimes the kids themselves say, I'm going to take 6 APs. And if we don't say, that's a little bit too much, don't you think? How many are other kids taking? 3. Can you do 6? I'm not sure. okay, well, maybe you shouldn't do 6.
Right.
Sometimes we have to rein them in because they want too much and they don't know.
This is
So it's hard, but
interesting.
ages 4 through 12 are definitely important in terms of setting up a good work ethic, in terms of teaching kids how to relate to other children well. And that's
Yeah,
certainly
no, I
a very
think
good point.
beautiful points that you're saying, that really not only should you not push them too far, but when they are pushing themselves too far,
Right.
make sure
Right.
that they're having a happy and balanced life. And I think that's a very important thing. And I know that when admission officers look at resumes, they're actually looking for more balanced kids.
Exactly.
That's why they were looking for
Yeah.
well-rounded kids, not people who took 20 APs and didn't do anything else. I mean,
Well,
that's
because admissions officers have also seen that the kids who were pushed, and whose resumes, whose CVs, who look perfect, they may fall apart when they get to college because now they don't have their parents pushing them. And then they say, I
yeah,
don't know how to function on my own. Or, boy, I was so stressed in high school. Let me go crazy and have a ton of fun.
yeah, yeah,
So they want kids who seem to be able to sustain success. And one sign of that is someone who is doing things that they really seem to love and have
yeah,
passion for and have friendships. And so they're looking for signs of balance, because if someone is out of balance in high school
yeah.
and then they're like a top that's teetering, and they might fall when they get to college. And now that means, semesters lost, or the kid will have to transfer, so
Yeah.
they're
So
looking for
actually, I
sustainability.
wanted to ask you about that. So there are very successful kids who go to good, quote unquote, Ivy League colleges, and then sometimes they fall apart. And what is the role of the parent at that time, and
Mm.
how can you support? Because you're not there, and it's a very
So,
difficult
so you're
moment.
speaking to a kid who went to an Ivy League college and fell apart.
And look at him, he turned out
Right.
fantastic.
So, I mean, I was a failure at the
Yeah.
age of, I mean, in some senses, I was a failure at the
Yeah.
age of 22, 23, 24. I couldn't get into medical school. I'd gone to Dartmouth. So I'd been a very good high school student, gone to Dartmouth College, but I was not focused. I was very interested in English literature, interested in politics, interested in all sorts of things. I wanted to study other things besides science. My science grades were not good, and I did not get into medical school immediately.
Yeah.
So I took a post-bac program and then got into medical school, US medical school, and done fine since. But the person you're looking at, who you're deeming successful, was, by his parents' measure, a failure from the ages of 22 through 25 or so, till I got into medical school.
Yeah.
So the idea that you just get into an Ivy League college and your future is assured is not the case in America. You have to prove yourself at every level.
Yeah.
So half the kids, at Harvard are going to be in the bottom half of their class, and the same for Dartmouth, and the same for lots of schools. And for pre-med, I mean, I can speak for pre-med. I mean, if you're not a good student in pre-med, you might not get into medical school. You might have to go to medical school, Caribbean or overseas, or, do a DO program. And again, I'm not judging these, but in terms of, that's just how it goes. So you have to succeed at every level. I mean, it's not just sort of do well in high school, get into a good college, and then
what support should the parent give at that time? That's the
right. So yeah, I mean, that gets a little complicated to discuss my own situation, but
no, not your own situation, but
my
in
parents,
general.
yeah,
I mean,
I think,
what would you say? Just to keep
parents
communicating?
I think that's the key word. Communication is the important thing. And I will say, my communication with my parents was not good in college. And that was part of why I dropped off, and why they couldn't do anything, because I wasn't telling them kind of why things were not going well. So, I mean, it gets a little bit complicated, but communication is very important. I think the relationship with your kids, you should be building a relationship that is marked by good two-way communication. You know what's happening with them. They feel comfortable coming to you with not only their successes, but also their struggles, such that you can help them and, fine tune what's going well and troubleshoot what's going wrong. Maybe they're not in the right school for them. Maybe they chose the wrong major. Maybe their habits are not good. And you need to say, look, I know you've enjoyed hanging out with people till 3 a.m, or you really like, reading this topic in the library, but you really need to focus on your science grades. And this is very autobiographical. So it would have been good if I had that with my own parents. I did not at the time. And my brother and sister probably had that a little bit more. It's a little bit complicated, but
the good news is you found your way. I mean, and I think that's the thing.
Exactly.
That's the thing that people should not worry. This is America. I mean, this is why it's beautiful to be here. You don't have just one shot. You have thousands of shots to do, attain your potential. And I think the parents should understand that and allow their kids to blossom in whatever they do, and actually there is one thing also I wanted to mention, that often parents see success of their children as their own success, and
Very good point. Very good.
that's, I think, and I think, when I was looking at the scriptures, right, the Tirukural, the ancient scripture says, that he defines a good child as one who acts in a way that you ask who his parents are.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
he doesn't say that means you go to an Ivy League school.
It does not.
Valluvar says you need to be a good person. And if you look at our history, we don't remember the people who made money or the kings. The people who we remember are people who were kind, compassionate, made a phenomenal impact on the world. So I think to think about success as raising a happy child who can be kind and compassionate, everybody is going to be financial success. That's given, so I don't know. Do you see that a little bit, that parents see that, their success?
Yeah. I mean, Asian cultures are collectivist cultures where it's not just about you. You are part of a family as well. And, what you do reflects on your family for better or worse.
Yeah.
So, as a second generation child, I mean, if you're born and raised here, you're expected to be successful in part for your own for your own self, but also to bring pride to your family, as parents hope that their children can bring pride to them. So kids know that, and they want to do well in order to please their parents and make their parents proud, which then the parents can take to the community and say, look how successful my child is. The downside can be if parents' expectations are rigid or excessive, the bar is too high, if the bar keeps getting raised, if it seems clear that the parents are more interested in other people's opinion than the child's own well-being, that can be very demoralizing to the child, or can make the child really work very hard to make it over that bar, which is kind of exhausting. I saw a very successful doctor, but he was really struggling in other ways. When I was at Boston Medical Center as a resident, adult psychiatry resident, there was a fellow, pulmonary fellow from another hospital who came into the emergency room, and he had cut his wrists, not very deeply, but the reason was his parents had expected him to have whatever college he went to, he had to have a 3.8. So in this case, he made the 3.8 in college. But then it seemed like their expectation was to marry someone within the same subcaste. And he did that. He found someone in the same subcaste. They actually didn't like her. They insulted her. He still married her, thinking it would somehow please them. And then his wife and his parents had such conflict that he was really torn between them to the degree that he literally, just to get help and to bring attention to his own plight, hurt himself. And then now his parents and his wife had to figure out how to make peace. But sometimes you have rigid parents who say this is what we expect, and the kids are desperately trying to achieve what they know the parents want. There's this dream.
I think you're saying something very important, that the children want to please their parents. That's an important point. It's not that they don't, and you're saying that's an overarching thing, right, in every child. And so I've often seen parents say, look at that kid, he is going to whatever X, or she is doing this. I would instead love to say, be happy for them, if they are happy with what they are doing, and let's celebrate them. I mean, people are just not celebrating other people's success, but just comparing, so I really feel it'd be great to say, hey, look at the child, he's doing great or she's doing great, and what can we learn from them? And maybe this child doesn't want to be that child, and then, and really celebrate the success of this child as well, whatever their success is.
When I was in high school on Long Island, a friend of mine who's now a very successful school psychologist, she would come up to me and say, how can I be more like you? I would say, what? And she said, my mother says I should be like you. Tell me how to be more like you. You're successful. I had good grades, SAT scores. So her mother said, this is the star of the community. Be more like him. That's a rather toxic thing to say to someone. That's unfortunate. And it's, and this person had some problems with her mother overall, but it's not fair to be compared to someone else because each person is different. And,
that's the beauty. I think the
That is
world
the beauty.
is different. I mean, if everybody was the same, if
Right.
everybody was Dr. Rohit Chandra, it'll be a boring world, right? Or
Oh
Ranjani
yeah,
Saigal,
I'm
right? Like,
really not that exciting. So
no, no.
you want to be a little bit different
We
from me,
want
but
everybody to attain their potential. You're wonderful, Rohit. But you want to attain your own potential and
yeah,
shine
exactly,
in
exactly.
that way, right? And in the scriptural way, that's what it says. You come with your
Yeah,
karma, you come with your own,
right.
qualities. And, if
Yeah,
you could have a platform to, express those qualities, I think that's the task of
yeah,
the parent to help guide the child to, get that. And of
yeah.
course, blessings of God. But
We Indians are often very hierarchical, and we say, be more like the person above,
ah,
and put effort in to climb faster, to go higher.
yeah,
And effort is thought to be something that can be just redoubled. Like,
yeah,
okay, I know my sister, when she was in high school, I have a younger sister, and my mother's a doctor, my father's
yeah,
a doctor. My mother wanted my sister to be a doctor, and
yeah.
she said to my sister, it's not hard. I will help you with biology. And my sister said, I don't like biology and I don't want to be a doctor. No, 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 no. If you do well in biology, you will be fine.
Yeah.
You'll want to be a doctor. Once you succeed, you will like it. So my sister was now forced to study several hours a night of biology with my mother, and she maxed out at maybe an 88% and got a B plus. And she said, I still hate biology. It's not a good grade. I still hate biology. This is what I'm maxing out at with a doctor's help. This is not for me. I don't like this. But my mother said, just try harder. Said, no, 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 no,
And
no,
it did work.
no. There's
Yeah.
no more. I can't try any harder than this. That's it.
Yeah.
So my sister's a lawyer and she's happy, and this is where she
And a very
fits.
good lawyer. I mean,
That's
there is
fine.
so, yeah,
But you don't
exactly.
have to be a doctor or a lawyer or a software engineer or all this. People can succeed in various ways in
Yeah.
America. If you actualize your talent, the things that you're good at, then you will do fine. Parents often are like, oh, my child is displaying talent in acting. Stop that. My child is displaying talent in painting. No, 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 cut that off. We don't want these to be potential professions. But,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
just
Now, I think this is important to identify what your child is good at. And often
right,
you may not understand the things that they are interested in, because I teach dance, and sometimes I see
right,
kids who are very good at dance and the parents don't understand what a career in dance could look like.
right.
And I have a couple of students who have taken on a career in, Indian classical dance and are doing very well. And because, it was their potential. And
Yes,
that's
exactly.
important to understand that in America, you can have pretty good financial success
Yeah.
no matter what you do.
I
So
mean,
I
it's
think,
true that there is a bottleneck in terms of like the arts. I mean, it's harder to make money in the arts.
sure.
There's no question. I mean, I wanted to be a writer when I was in college. As I
Yeah.
said, I was not focused. So I wanted to be a writer. And my parents said, I don't think you'll,
Make money. Yeah.
it's hard to be successful in writing. You want to write fiction?
Yeah.
How many people are successful fiction writers? Well, let me try my hand at it. Turns out I was pretty terrible at writing fiction,
Yeah.
so there was no problem there.
Right.
What I wanted did not square my talents. So then, whew, that's fine. But then
Exactly.
you have situations like a family friend in New York. All three of her kids went to top schools.
Yeah.
The middle one wanted to take some time off after college to be a journalist. And so the mother said, okay. But then the grandmother said to the mother, the maternal grandmother said to her daughter, why are you letting your daughter do this? She may not get into medical school. You have to push her to go to medical school right away.
Right.
And so the mother, brilliant woman, she's a doctor,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she said to me, what do you think? I said, oh, I've looked at your daughter's writing. She's a fantastic writer. Her articles are in the Atlantic. She is writing on Google Glass at a time when that was very popular. She's a very impressive writer.
Right.
I'm
And
sure
then
she'll
just
be fine.
fine.
Indeed,
Exactly.
indeed. She went to medical school and she's thriving, and she's
Right.
married and she loves her residency and all that. So she needed a couple of years to explore a talent of hers. So
Absolutely. And I
it's
think this
important
is
to look
the,
at
I think, important thing. You don't need to think that you need to do it all in short
Right.
amount of time.
Yeah.
Plenty of time, plenty of paths. Allow
Exactly.
your child to grow. And
Yeah.
really, I think the summary is, be aware that success is not just one dimensional, and there's
Right.
much we can do. And so really work with your child,
Exactly.
communicate with your child, and ensure that the child is happy. And if not, find support, and there's plenty of support out there.
Mhm.
So thank you, Rohit,
Beautiful.
as always,
Beautiful. Thank you.
for your guidance. And hopefully we'll wait for the next issue. We will think about what we need to talk about next. And until then, thank you. Namaste.
Thanks. Namaste.